Hello, sophomores. Welcome to our first lesson for the fourth quarter during this remote learning experience. Today, we will be taking notes on the famous Shakespearean play, Macbeth. This is a sort of epic, emotional filled story with elements of witchcraft and lust and murder and revenge, and deeply questions ideas of fate versus free will. And for this reason, the play stands today still as one of Shakespeare's best. So right now, what I'd like you to do is prepare something to take notes with, whether it's a pen and a paper or a document on your computer, so that we can begin discussing and thinking about this very important and famous play. So on your screen, you should currently be seeing a painted image of William Shakespeare with the title Macbeth. Macbeth is the namesake of our main character, arguably a protagonist. And in this slide, I discuss the plot for Macbeth, which begins with a war. It begins at the end of a war. Macbeth is a Scottish soldier, and he has just won, essentially, a defensive war for his country. And he individually is praised for his bravery and nobility in this fight as sort of the primary reason that the Scots win this war, this defense of like an insurgence within Scotland. And he is credited for his bravery as the reason that the victory was won. However, on his journey home, he is approached by three witches that sort of come out of apparitions in thin air. He's with his friend, his best friend and fellow soldier, Banquo, and the two of them are sort of surrounded by these witches. And a couple different depictions of Macbeth have different ways of showing this, of them being surrounded or they're coming in front of them as they're walking. But regardless, they are sort of encountered by these three witches, and they, in a very abstract way, prophesize his ascension, Macbeth's ascension, to the title of king. He is currently not king. Okay, so this is a big deal for him to see and hear with someone who can validate that it happened, that he will become king. So he, in this moment, decides to write a letter to his wife and send it ahead, because the letter can get there faster than he can on foot, and tell his wife, Lady Macbeth, of this occurrence and this prophecy. And we find that she is fueled by this message to make that fate occur on their own accord. And this is where the chaos and the tragedy ensue. And this is where the theme of fate versus free will is projected onto the very first scene and moments of this play. That Macbeth is told that this will happen sort of fatalistically, whereas his wife wants to ensure its occurrence through her will. Just give you a moment to finish this slide. So the creation of this play, now there's a lot of history that is being still unfolded and discovered regarding Shakespeare's composition and his process. And no one really knows, because obviously we weren't recording history as well then as we do now. But we do know that this play was first published in 1623. If you think about it, that's almost 400 years ago. Okay. Which is just crazy to think about, that it still stands. Move my picture out of the way here. So it was published in this thing called the First Folio, and the First Folio was essentially just like an archive, a big publication of all of Shakespeare's plays that he had up to that moment, or most of them. And it was in that First Folio that Macbeth was published, and it underwent many revisions and additions. But these first plays are sort of prized as like the originals. It's like the Jordans before the reissues, and these are the original ones. So my third bullet point touches on sort of the skeptical revisionist history regarding the composition of these plays. Thomas Middleton is believed to have partaken in the composition of this. This does create a little bit of, rumors about the composition, if Shakespeare really is as great as he was. And then other historians on some side of the other side of that debate say, well, this actually wasn't abnormal for a successful playwright at the time to be using and discussing and co-writing with some other very capable writers as well. So whatever your opinion is, it should just be understood that there are other writers credited with that First Folio. And we can't tell exactly what parts were not written by Shakespeare and which ones were, and this creates a whole bunch of debate. But Christopher Marlowe was also recently discovered as contributing some help, especially on the play Henry VI. And it's now calculated that about 17 of these 44 plays were collaborative efforts, meaning that Shakespeare didn't do it alone. This is like, Drake having a co-write on something from views. It's some people see it as a problem. Some people just see it as a fact of the industry. Regardless, it should be known that this is where Macbeth comes from, that First Folio. So we're going to break down a lot of individual characters in this play, slide by slide, mostly because they do have so much depth and richness to them. The first one we're going to talk about is Lord Macbeth, or the main character of Macbeth. At the beginning of the play, the protagonist, he is the title of the Thane of Glamis. This is like some sort of like middle tier royalty that still is involved in wars and fighting. And it obviously is of some nobility, but it's not of the highest nobility. So when he does win this war or help defend this civil war in Scotland, he is seen as being very brave and successful soldier. And he is then promoted by the king to the Thane of Cawdor, which is, I'm not really sure what that actually means, but I do know it's promotion. It's not a side-to-side transition. He's moving up, right? But this is the last bullet point on this slide, indicates his wife is fueling him to seek this title of king at a more rapid pace. This would, of course, entail the betrayal of the king, who is sort of his friend, right? He works for him. So she is like, dude, you gotta push for this to happen. It's not gonna happen on its own. And he's like, whoa, that's my buddy. I don't want to do this. That's the point. That's where this whole conflict comes from in the play, is this betrayal Is this free will? Is this fate? What balance do we strike with these questions in our lives? How do we move forward? Are the people at the top there because they pushed other people out of the way? Some people think so, some don't, but that is the question laid out with the character of Lord Macbeth. Banquo is his best friend. Now you should notice this picture on the right-hand side of the slide is sort of ghostly and disgusting in a way. And that does foresee, spoiler alert, a little bit of Banquo's future. But Banquo as well is a Thane. He's a Thane of, I can't pronounce that exactly. I probably should have looked that up, but he is his ally and his friend, okay? He's sort of an equal, right? They're buddies. And Banquo is there when Macbeth is encountered or embraced by these prophetic witches, and he hears and sees the prophecy that Macbeth hears and sees. This becomes a point of paranoia for Macbeth. The fact that his friend Banquo knows of this prophecy makes him feel paranoid that Banquo will either use this information against him or use it for his own ascension. And this creates a lack of trust between the two friends. Banquo does stay loyal to Macbeth. That's a little bit of a spoiler, but he does stay loyal to Macbeth and reappears, as we see on this slide, as a ghost to his friend. After he dies, he reappears. Also, Banquo's legacy is taken on by his son Fleance, and Fleance takes a significant role in this play after his father's death. So this is sort of the story of two buddies who are torn apart by like a lust for power or status, and how that can tear two people apart. And Banquo is seen as like a noble, loyal friend and figure of the play. Lady Macbeth is one of the most debated and discussed figures in all of literature. No joke. She's the wife of Lord Macbeth and a pivotal character in the tragedy or the tragedies of this play. She entices her husband or encourages him or pushes him to seek the title of king, the throne of King of Scotland, by murdering his friend and superior, his boss, really, King Duncan. She emasculates her husband in this process. She calls him weak. She sort of eggs him on. She sort of teases him in this process because she sees him as a sort of soft, not power-seeking person, whereas she is obviously very driven. She succeeds to guilt and dies off stage. We don't see the way that she dies, the manner that she dies, but she does die in this play. And she's often torn between the stereotypical forces of femininity. So she's compassionate and loving, and also quite lustful. We'll see her use her sexuality as well in a striking way in the depictions of this play on stage. But she also sort of has these masculine, or what are stereotypically seen as masculine, features of physical strength and dominance. She's very assertive. She's very physically assertive as well. And she's has a presence over her husband of control, or seeks to. And this leads to a lot of discussion of Lady Macbeth, either as a figure of feminist strength or as a victim of misogyny and the patriarchal ways of the past. Is she this way because she's just been held down by men her whole life? Is this the only way that women could find power in the 1600s? That is a question that comes with the character of Lady Macbeth by nature. So she's a really popular and still to this day discussed character. I'm sure you've seen some depiction of her in pop culture with blood on her hands or holding some daggers or something. These are typical conversations that still resonate today. And I believe this is the last slide, just sort of surveys the many, many themes of this play. And as you read it or watch it or both, I want you to think about a lot of these ideas of fate and free will, of the idea of revenge versus maybe forgiveness. Power is certainly a theme, and status, and how you achieve that status and what that signifies, and how you hold that power over people or don't hold that power over people. And with that, ambition as well. And I just want you to remember on the bottom, that's what this bottom of the slide says. Themes are not just titles, right? They're statements or questions or ideas about these titles and subjects. So what is it about fate? What is it about revenge that Macbeth is saying? Well, that's up to you to determine in the course of this reading. So I hope that slideshow worked for you and gave you a better understanding of how to anticipate this really still very famous play. I mean, there are modern interpretations, films, TV shows that are in dialogue with this play still today in 2020. So it's not going away, and it really helps you guys, I think, to get in on that conversation by watching and reading this play. So yeah, I mean, Shakespeare is difficult to read. So I'm gonna have I do have notes on reading Shakespeare on how to help. I do think though that you just need to watch it and or perform it yourself. It really does come to life, and we're gonna try to tackle that beast in the weeks ahead. So stay tuned. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Make sure you hit the bell so you get notifications of new videos and new postings. And I hope you all are doing well during this very strange time in American history. And I look forward to seeing you in the classroom again soon. Take care.